All right, welcome to our new episode, Expanding in the Negative. So let's just take a look at this. I put it back. In Government is Self-Government, right there on page 56, you'll see a story that's taken from a Laird letter. And basically it goes like this. So this is a conversation. Is Sandra complaining about her difficulties? No, old Sandra is making it that way. She's a real, huh?
That's why.
That's why. She's making it. That's why. She's a real existential chick. The welfare worker to whom Sandra's brother was speaking asked, "What do you mean?" And he said, "I mean that was a mess of chaos she was in. But she she made herself right in the middle of those bad scenes. Now she really is." This is the meaning of the phrase expanding in the negative. The question is, would Sandra have made herself without the chaos? No, not Sandra. If she could have found herself without it, she would have. And that's true for many of us. A man asked Dr. John M. Dorsey, "Who needs cancer?" He replied, "I do. It's a marvelous self-help whenever I insist on using it. Blessed cancer, I say to myself, you stand ever ready to come to the rescue of my life whenever I insist upon living outside of my mind." And Alan Watts wrote a very enlightening book, one of my favorite books, The Wisdom of Insecurity. Love that book. The wisdom that there is no life or truth other than my own mind, capital M, is seen in the human sense of things as humanity becoming divine, expanding into the negative. Now, all of that is from Margaret Laird's book, Government is Self-Government. So when you look at expanding in the negative, Betty, say in layman's terms, what exactly are we talking about?
You're talking about working your way through a problem.
Okay.
When you're working your way through a problem, it's not a waste of time. It's not something to annoy the hell out of you. It's really an opportunity to see a different point of view on something you're involved in.
Right. So if it looks like crap and everything's going to where in a handbasket, it's basically that's the only way I could see it for what there is to discover
at that very moment.
At that moment.
Yeah. Any other moment will be different.
Okay. All right. Okay. Anything else you want to say about this one before we get right into the quotes?
Well, the thing that I've learned as I went along is that expanding in the negative, well, it looks like a problem that you're wrestling with or engaged in or whatever. It is actually no different than we had a great time yesterday. It's the same thing.
Right.
It's you active, involved in being yourself.
Right.
One
yeah, it seems to me that we just put a value judgment on the one that is happy and fun and the one that is a challenge and a struggle. And so we put a value judgment on them rather than treating both imposters the same.
That's right. Good way to put it.
Okay. All right. Now, if you have any questions as we go through any of this, just put them in the comments. We'll get them. We'll include them. We love that interaction. And here we go. Okay, in Government is Self-Government, on page 57, Margaret Laird wrote, "Progress is experienced only by living self-consciously as mind," capital M.
Yep.
And she goes on to say, "He who would gain health, wealth, and happiness must not identify with them, but with infinity, in which there is neither gain nor loss, but fullness, wholeness." And that gets right at what you were just saying about good or bad, we treat it the same. If we have a really great time, we're like, yes, look at that. It was great. But then when we have the problem, it's like, why me, oh Lord?
Yeah.
And instead, it's neither gain nor loss. It's fullness, it's wholeness,
Yeah,
expressed the only way you can see it.
it's your own infinity unfolding.
Yeah.
And it does that the only way that it can get through to you.
Yeah.
So it'll either be, yeah, it's great, or I don't like it. But either way, that's what's happening.
Yeah, it's kind of like when something gets to a critical point is when we finally take action. And
Yep.
sometimes we got to get hit over the head with a baseball bat in order for us to go, oh, I got to get something going. And that's true, that is true with human psychology.
Yep.
So this would be the same then, in that sense. It'd be the same kind of message. Not that it has to go that way, but typically it just does.
Okay.
I don't know. All right. So in Science and Health on page 22, line 6, Mary Baker Eddy wrote, waking to Christ's demand, the demand to live one's divinity or godhood self-consciously, mortals experience suffering, or, as we've been talking about, expanding in the negative.
That's right. And that's what we call suffering. The words expanding in the negative, we're talking about that.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes it clear. This causes them, even as drowning men, to make vigorous efforts to save themselves, and these efforts are crowned with success.
And that's a quote from Mary Baker Eddy.
Yeah, right from Science and Health on page 22, line 9.
Yep.
And in Mind as the Athlete, your book, on page 29, you wrote, scientific metaphysics is spiritual psychology and can be effectively lived by any conscientious student on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that just takes discipline.
Yeah, and continue with the note because that finishes the thought.
Oh, okay. Such living shifts the everyday experience of life to one of satisfaction, fulfillment, and joy.
Yep.
And essentially why it does that is because you're living the fullness and the wholeness right now.
Yeah, you're allowing infinity to unfold.
Yeah, to look however it looks without applying your value judgment.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's sort of like being willing and allowing.
Yeah. Okay.
And when you allow and when you're willing, you've dropped the personal sense of yourself.
Yeah.
You're paying attention to the idea rather than how you feel about it.
Yeah. I like to think of it like being curious.
Inquiring, yeah. Okay.
When you've got some curiosity, how come that looks that way? You're not sitting there judging and evaluating. You're basically open to discovery.
You're exploring.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
good.
All right. Now on Government as Self-Government on page 57, Margaret Laird also wrote, as conscious identity, thinking, I am self-directed and self-saved. And of course, this is from Government is Self-Government.
Yes.
And she says, I must not look to a God outside of myself for salvation.
Yeah, and that's interestingly worded.
Mm-hmm.
Because most people do not recognize that what's present when they are present is God being.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking outside of yourself, you're missing the boat.
Right. Well, there's nothing outside of yourself.
That's right. That's why you're missing the boat.
It may look that way, but it's not that way, right?
That's right.
Okay. Now, in Science and Health on page 22, line 14, Mary Baker Eddy wrote, if your endeavors are beset by fearful odds, do not become a sluggard in the race. So why are you laughing?
Because her word sluggard has always made me laugh.
Okay, well, tell me what all that means. Do not become a sluggard. So don't what?
Fussing, complaining, losing your focus, not staying with the idea. As a sluggard.
Oh,
All caught up in the junk.
so every time, oh, this is really good. We can all just highlight the word sluggard. And all the times when we're in our judgment and our opinions and we're and all that, we can then say, oh, I'm just being a sluggard. And if that doesn't just jump you right out of it, I don't know what will.
Okay.
So I like that. All right. Love means that we shall be tried and purified. In other words, it's going to look however it looks, and sometimes it'll look good and sometimes it'll look bad, but we're going to go through all of it in the name of self-discovering.
Yeah, and it's also the identifying language of paradox living. Human living is always going to have the ups and downs. And you aren't going to ever, as long as you're around calling yourself an individual or human being, you aren't going to be without that.
Right.
So it's good to just recognize what it is.
Yeah.
It's the paradox. It's the way human living occurs.
Yeah. Good, bad, right, wrong. You always got both. And then it's treat both imposters just the same.
That's right. Yep.
And therein lies the challenge. And when we fail at that challenge, what are we? We're just sluggards.
Yeah. And the word imposters, when you use it, is the belief that something exists that could contribute to you or take away from you.
Right.
Because there isn't anything out there.
Yeah.
You're talking about living yourself divinely, which is all the contributing and so on that goes on. Right. But we think that it's something else. We think it happened because.
Right.
We think there's some other thing making it happen.
Yeah.
I am the world I walk through.
Right.
I'm responsible.
Exactly. All right. And in Mind is the Athlete, on page 29, you wrote, thoughts are things in a universe constituted of consciousness.
Yep. And since the universe is consciousness, all things are thoughts.
Right. Now, have you ever wondered what has us behave the way we do?
Did you ask me?
Yeah. It has to do with an instinctive or intuitive awareness that we already own it all.
Yeah, we do. I am the world I walk through. It sure is. Margaret said that, and she was right on.
But you're saying it has to do with an instinctive or intuitive awareness that we already own it all. Speak to that a little bit.
We do already own it all, but we like to think there's something out there. So it's her fault, or it's because he told me that, or it's because I read a book.
Yeah.
Or it's because. And what it is your own infinity unfolding fullness and wholeness and joy and well-being as your experience of living, if you're conscious. If you're asleep at the switch, you'll fuss about the whole thing.
Right. Because if you're asleep at the switch and you're fussing about the whole thing, what are you being? A sluggard. That's right. A sluggard.
I knew you were going to come back to that word.
Oh, it's such a precious one. All right. And in Government is Self-Government on page 57, Margaret Laird wrote, the conscious human individuality that I am is fully equipped to be its own existential living without direction or guidance.
Yeah, and that requires a listening presence as your own experience.
Okay, say more about that. Say more about listening. That requires a listening presence as your own experience. Say more about that.
Well, I miss the boat when I think that whatever's going on is because somebody else is doing something. I really grow the world I walk through. And that somebody else, the timing of it, the quality of it, the sufficiency of the answer and so on is always present. And your ability to allow that to show up determines the quality of your experience.
Yeah, I can get that.
Okay.
And in Science and Health, Mary Baker Eddy wrote on page 22, line 30, mercy cancels the debt only when justice approves.
Now I have it on page 22. Did I make a
Yeah,
mistake?
22, line 30.
Oh, okay.
I looked it up.
Okay.
22, line 30. Mercy cancels the debt only when justice approves.
And it's interesting to have that wording to
Right.
kind of look at, because if truth is the functioning presence of whatever's going on, it has to be this way. It has to be that whatever occurs has to be in sync with, if I can put it that way, in sync with what's going on. If I look at it and think there's something going wrong here, I've got to take care of that, I've got to change things. That may be that you will change things, but the reason you will change things is because what's going on is something you're not seeing clearly. If you're not seeing clearly, you aren't going to have peace and joy and power as easily as you think. If you're seeing clearly, it's like duck soup. You just walk right through.
Right.
I remember one of the things on Margaret's seminar tapes. A man called her and said, "They tell me I've got cancer of the tongue." And she says, "Okay." And he says, "So if I've got cancer of the tongue, I can't do anything about that, can I?" She says, "Nope, can't do anything about cancer of the tongue." Do you know why she said that? Do
Why?
you?
Why?
Because cancer of the tongue doesn't exist. So he says, the only thing I can do is walk right through it. Is that right? And Margaret said, absolutely.
And you say, and the whole thing of cancer of the tongue, it's because language, the appearance world doesn't exist.
That's right.
It just appears like it does.
And well, it's the look you have. It's your view. It's a
of the
point.
one reality present.
And any point of view I've got doesn't exist concretely.
Right.
It's just a view. But when I look at the view, I think it lives out there.
Right. Right.
So
and when I think it lives out there, and I have all my judgments and opinions about whether I like it or I don't like it, what am I? I'm being a sluggard.
Yeah.
Okay. Revenge is inadmissible. Shall we say that again? Shall we say that again? Revenge is inadmissible. Wrath, which is only appeased, is not destroyed, but partially indulged. What is that? Break that down a little bit. Unpack that.
Well, if you wrath, if you're angry,
yeah,
if you're angry at something, depending on the circumstances, but it's easy to say, "Oh well, I'll take care of that later," and you can be pleasant. Well, wrath appeased is not destroyed. You haven't gotten rid of your anger at all.
Right. It's just, you've partially indulged it.
You indulge it because you're sitting it over here to take care of it later.
Right. And it'll come back in full force.
Much fuller force than it was at the beginning.
Right. When anyone around you will least expect it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then later you can even find yourself saying, "I'm sorry I did that. It had nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
I just unloaded on you."
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And when you look at revenge is inadmissible, what is that pointing to? Just
it's not a solution.
Right. Well, what it is
scientists would not ever
you would never have revenge against yourself, and if you really got you or the world you walk through, there's nothing to have revenge around. So revenge would only assume that you think there's someone out there doing something to you and you need to get back at them.
Or you think you did something wrong and you're mad at yourself.
Right.
Ooh. And that is the same thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah. All that negative self-talk, that just means you're being a sluggard.
You think there's more than one thing going on.
That's right.
In
So
the
that's what I'm saying.
the really beginning words of living science is all is infinite mind and its infinite manifestation.
Right.
That's all there is.
Right.
And when you're not living with that as the guiding principle, you've got all this other stuff that you want to let go of.
That's right. And when you get all that other stuff, pretty much points to being a sluggard. All right. Here we go. I'm sorry. I love that word. Okay. Mind is the athlete. In your book on page 31, you wrote the divinity that embraces the humanity of every single individual knows no limitation in any direction of thought.
Yep.
That would speak to an unlimited and fully possible world.
Well, of course. And when you say that, you're talking about an experience.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about yourself.
Right.
There isn't any world out there.
Right.
It's my world experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because I am the world I walk through.
That's right.
Yes. Absolutely. All right. What you already know can be a launching pad for what's next, or it can be a prison cutting you off from possibility.
It's all up to you, isn't it?
Right. Because when it's a prison cutting you off from possibility, who are you being?
Yep.
A sluggard. It's plain and simple. No.
And since a sluggard is a point of view, you can let go of it anytime.
Exactly. Exactly. So what I really like that though, what you already know can be a launching pad for what's next, or a prison cutting you off from possibility. Because if you don't have any willingness or curiosity, there was one other word, and I'm trying to think.
You'll give up the sense of disappointment.
Yeah.
Because that's a judgment.
Right.
You just let it go.
That's
because
right.
you recognize that it looks exactly the way it should look.
Right. So you never's a prison.
Who you're being is the demand on what's appearing.
Yeah. It's only a prison when you think it's bad and wrong and you got a judgment about it and all that, which makes you a sluggard.
Standing behind the...
That's right. And you created the bars.
Yep.
All right. I totally got it. All right. If there's any questions, anything like that, this is your chance to type them into the comments with any questions. And the real lesson, I think, is you have exactly what you need always for your own self-discovering. Be willing, get curious, be open, or begin to recognize when you're just being a sluggard.
You know why you have everything you need all the time?
Because that's infinity. It's the nature of your divinity.
And there's nothing else going on.
Right.
So the answer was there before the problem occurred.
Yeah.
It's all perfect.
All right. Okay. All right. Great show. Thanks. That's from Dominique.
Oh, I'm glad.
Thank you so much.
He wrote.
All right.
He wrote. There was one other thing. I'll share it in a minute.
Okay, go for it. What do you got?
Well, we got a nice note from somebody that listened the last time. Somebody named Brian. And he said, what makes this episode so fascinating to me, since all experience is self-sensing, is that the possibility exists that viewers are mentally living these hosts right now. And what you hear is coming from your own within and not specifically from them. As idea individually expressed, they are each in a world they walk through. As far as I'm concerned, it appears that my Kim and Betty are within me consciously, not out there in a video. At least it appears so. In the language of perception, the episode I hear may be completely different from another, if there are any others.
Exactly. And you know what's really cool? I love that. And you know what's really cool? We
Yeah.
now have, I don't know, 175 some videos out there. And
Yep.
it doesn't matter if you go back and listen to any of them right now or whenever, right in the moment you do, it'll be totally new what'll come up for you out of that
Right.
because you're living it right now from who you are right now. And who
And
you
there
are
are no
right now, go ahead.
there are no accidents.
That's right. And who you are right now isn't who you were just then.
That's right. And it's
So,
different right now.
right. Exactly. It's all different right now. And Amado Bernardo said, thank you so much. I am watching.
Oh, wonderful.
Very great. Thank you. All right. So go forth, be curious, be willing. And when you're not, just recognize you're being a sluggard and let it go. And then continue and walk on. And we will see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel, 5 p.m. Pacific and 7 p.m. Central. And we'll see you next week. Take care.